are lines of Chicagoans right now of people who do not have food, you guys. And if you've never gone hungry, you wouldn't know why I have that urgency. If you've never opened up your refrigerator and there's nothing in it, poverty sucks.
Is he crying right now?
Corporations are making a killing right now, and we have elders that are more interested in defending these big corporations than families like mine who went without food and electricity and could not afford rent and mortgage. Get me something I can work with.
Is that the mayor of the city of Chicago crying right now over the fact that his own alders, Democrats in the Chicago City Council, have rejected his proposal for a corporate head tax? He crying. Brandon Johnson right now in this moment is tearing up. Somebody get Brandon Johnson a glass of milk, because he obviously cannot handle the pressure of being the mayor of the city of Chicago. He's talking about how people are so poor in the city, they got to open up their fridge in order to see the fridge being completely empty, and he's crying about it, even though, again, this is the guy that is raising taxes on the citizens of the city of Chicago, making them significantly worse off. Again, crying right now in this little meeting thing, in this little press conference, embarrassing in every possible way, and this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Well, the mercury isn't the only thing registering as chilly this December. Relations between Mayor Brandon Johnson and 26 members of City Council are frigid as the two sides remain deadlocked on a key feature of Johnson's 2026 budget.
So we have gone over the Chicago budget disaster multiple times on this channel, and Brandon Johnson's proposals in order to solve said budget deficit, which in reality and actuality, as we've documented multiple different times, is a way for him to keep his promises to the Chicago Teachers Union, which he, by the way, happens to be a member of, at the expense of the Chicago taxpayers. So all of this performance about poor people and whatnot is all Brandon Johnson running cover for himself as he's trying to deliver for his real bosses, the Chicago Teachers Union. And guess what? The Chicago alders are not playing around with him. They have rejected proposal after proposal, and it's absolutely embarrassing that this man at this moment in time, who likes to call everything evil white racism, is now crying as a way in order to avoid accountability for the budget deficit that he created.
And the thing we're talking about, Erica, is the much ballyhooed employee head tax, initially pitched as $21 per month per employee on businesses with more than 100 employees. But late today, we've learned the mayor is floating an alternative version to that that taxes fewer companies, those with 500 employees.
So as you guys just heard right there, Brandon Johnson is absolutely obsessed with getting this corporate head tax installed in the city of Chicago, and he's actually trying to move the threshold in order to get it passed because he wants to be able to go to his constituents and say that he was able to get the money that he needed for the programs that he wants via these progressive sources. In fact, we've documented on this channel in other interviews and press conferences, Brandon Johnson saying progressive taxation, progressive revenue.
Earlier this year, Chicago's credit rating was knocked down a notch, a signal to investors that the city may struggle to meet its financial obligations. The mayor says that's exactly why he's pushing for new progressive revenue sources and says financial problems already existed well before he took office.
Securing revenue from areas where our economy is shifting, which the social media tax is one of those areas that I believe that will ensure that we generate more progressive revenue to deal with the structural damage that I inherited.
Progressive this, progressive that, as a way to cover up for the fact that he is pushing a tax that does not work and has not worked anywhere in the country. And in fact, the city of Chicago used to have this tax. It ultimately ended up getting repealed in about 2014, and post the repeal of this tax, exactly what experts predicted happened, which was you had a jobs boom in the city of Chicago. So what Brandon Johnson is actually going to do if he gets this implemented is reduce hiring in the city, as again, the tax quite literally is charged to employers. If they hire too many people, they'll have to pay it. And yeah, this is a disincentive for hiring, which will ultimately end up lowering tax receipts overall, which is why the alders are against it. And again, I will point out that the alders that are against this are Democratic alders. These are not right-wing Republicans. This is not a left-wing executive versus a Republican city council. These are all Democrats. Brandon Johnson has just lost so much political capital since he's been in office that he has no trust among his own party.
He has resorted to finger pointing.
Their proposal was $300 million short.
He's resorted to insults.
Doubling garbage fees, coming up with scenarios that have not had any real vetting.
And attacks on those of us who have dared to call out the dangerous flaws in his irresponsible budget.
You got to give respect to the Chicago alders, because every time Brandon Johnson passes them a new tax increase and tells them that they're evil, white, and racist if they don't approve it, they respond basically like this.
It's just, that's incomplete.
We've done the work. The person who hasn't done the work and hasn't shown their work is the mayor.
No, we're not doing that. That's embarrassing.
These are some of the 26 alders drawing a line in the sand over the mayor's marquee budget proposal.
We can't afford a head tax in any form. This is a hard stop.
The head tax, which the mayor says will not cost jobs, was the focal point of a weekend budget session between alders and the mayor's budget team.
The only person that was absent was the mayor. If we're going to make a deal, he needs to be at the table.
I'm not the first mayor to send their budget director and their CFO into a room to have a conversation.
And he doesn't want to be the first mayor to see a city shut down over a budget impasse.
So you gotta love this. Brandon Johnson has been shot down time and time again for different revenue proposals that he has put forward for the Chicago alders. And right now they are on the cusp for the first time in the history of the city of Chicago for a local government shutdown if they don't get this budget done by the end of the year. But Brandon Johnson, being the lazy crybaby that he is, has time to go all over the news media and cry out those crocodile tears about people who open their fridge and see it happens to be empty, but he doesn't have time to go in person to negotiate on behalf of his own budget. And he says as his excuse that he's not the first mayor to send his budget director in his place in order to negotiate for his priorities. But again, if you're the first mayor that happens to be leading the city of Chicago to a government shutdown, then maybe you shouldn't go based on what other people have done when the budgets were done on time without the threat of a government shutdown. But again, Brandon Johnson can never take accountability for any of his own actions.
No one wants it, but it's something that I'm working overtime to ensure that it doesn't happen.
Some view the city's top executive using government shutdown talk as a political instrument as a Trump-like tactic.
100%. And what you're seeing is both extremes that are in charge of their respective governments at the same time. The far left and the far MAGA. And they're my way or the highway, and that's just not how it works.
So if you needed more proof that all of these people happen to be Democrats, you actually have this representative for the alders that is saying that Brandon Johnson is acting like Trump, trying to shut down the government in order to get his way. But in reality, as we know, because we actually followed the government shutdown, it was the Democratic Party who shut down the government in order to try to retain Obamacare subsidies that were passed under the Biden administration and were set to expire, because they were only passed in order to get people through the pandemic. So obviously you have the Democratic perspective on both sides of this, but they're not wrong that Brandon Johnson is hurtling the city towards a government shutdown.
In a letter to alders, Johnson refers to the council wars.
Day after day.
When Alderman Burke and Verdoliak
got 29 votes.
attempted to override Mayor Harold Washington's veto, a period of racially charged political infighting at City Hall, which some alders were outraged by.
It's insulting that this mayor would say things like that. We and many more of us, the majority of the city council, have been working for weeks trying to find alternative options.
So look, Brandon Johnson wouldn't be Brandon Johnson without playing the race card. So of course he ends up looking through the history of the city of Chicago, finding a black mayor, finding an issue where they were fighting over the budget or something similar, and of course likens what's going on right now to those racial tension times in the past, because again, the man is a one-trick pony. All he can do is call everyone evil, white, racist. But the thing that Brandon Johnson needs to learn is that when you're the executive, when you're the mayor of a city, saying everything is racist and everything is the fault of evil white racism doesn't actually solve any problems. It actually makes things worse because all you're doing is alienating people, because in reality, they're not going to be shamed into complying with your stupid ass agenda. Now, what we're seeing from Brandon Johnson right now is absolutely desperation. He's talking about how, oh my God, this is going to result in property tax increases. It's unfair to shift the burden of taxation onto the homeowners, even though, again, as we had pointed out for us in this Fox News segment, Brandon Johnson just last year tried closing the budget deficit through a property tax hike, which was also rejected by the alders.
This is an issue, guys, of how do you perform the best in order to sell the worst policy possible that's going to shift the burden of taxation away from downtown as you continue to chase businesses out and put it on the property owners, the homeowners of the city of Chicago, who are already seeing a 16% increase in their property taxes thanks to his policies that have chased businesses out of this city. What the mayor doesn't tell people while he's tearing up for the cameras is that just last year he tried to stick homeowners with a $300 million property tax increase, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars in new fines and fees. He's doing it again this year, but in order for him to make that campaign pledge that he wants to tax the rich, this is the performance we get. It has nothing to do with helping everyday Chicagoans, because he had none of these tiers when he was giving away $600 million to take care of 60,000 Venezuelan migrants here in the city of Chicago.
But to make matters worse, property taxes did actually go up significantly in the city of Chicago. They went up by 60%, and Brandon Johnson, knowing that this new assessment was coming and that taxes would be raised due to the fact that he has poor government policies in the city of Chicago, started going out prior to that announcement from Cook County and making the case that somehow Trump's tax cuts were the thing that were actually going to cause property taxes to increase through some magical mechanism in the city of Chicago.
The mayor's office clarifying that the corporate taxes prevent the need for any layoffs or a property tax hike at a time when Johnson says Trump's tax cuts are hurting working people.
We're talking about an additional $1,200 per year on average that working people will assume because of Donald Trump's cuts to the ultra rich.
When in reality, what we actually heard from the Cook County office, again, also a Democrat, is the reason why they had to raise taxes on property so high in the city of Chicago was due to the fact that Brandon Johnson has irresponsible government spending, and in addition to that, his policies are driving away businesses, so they're not getting the same level of revenue from commercial property that they were getting before.
Treasurer Maria Pappas says there has been a sharp drop in the value of downtown commercial buildings, paying about $120 million less this cycle. That's because of higher vacancy rates over the years.
It went down in a landslide, and it's coming back like a snail, slowly, very slowly, and not fast enough to handle these residences who are carrying the burden of it, because many of them are unrented. Many of these places are unrented. The taxes went down. What happened was the residences ended up picking up the bulk of these tax increases.
And to make matters worse for Brandon Johnson, the bulk of those tax increases ended up going to black neighborhoods, which were among his core constituents, the exact people that he promised that he was going to protect the most, even though, again, his policies did the exact opposite.
Rob, Judy, people may have sticker shock. The Cook County Treasurer's Office has been analyzing the new tax bills and says that citywide, the median residential bill jumped more than 16%. That's the biggest increase in at least 30 years. The Treasurer's Office says city spending increased and there are fewer commercial spaces to pay their share of the pie. And the hardest hit, predominantly black and brown communities on the south and west sides. In West Garfield Park, bills soared 133%. North Lawndale saw a 99% spike. And in Inglewood, taxes climbed more than 80%. The treasurer says many of those homes have been undervalued before the most recent assessment, which is done every 3 years.
So while Brandon Johnson is crying about poor people in black neighborhoods like the west side and the south side of Chicago opening up their fridge and having no food, and he's saying you just don't know what it's like, and all these definitely evil, white, and racist government policies are the reason that people are struggling, in reality, what we find out is that it is Brandon Johnson's fiscal policies, Brandon Johnson trying to give away money to the teachers union.
The mayor also defending his plan to sweep $1 billion in TIF funds, more than half of which would go to Chicago public schools.
What do you say to those who might see this as a budget for CPS, a reward for your allies?
A TIF surplus goes to our city colleges. It goes to our parks. goes to our libraries.
But the majority
tips
goes to
surpluses-
CPS.
Well, because that's the way the law is designed.
Right.
And so investing in CPS, that's a good thing, right?
Brandon Johnson trying to pay off key constituents that are actually responsible for driving away businesses and, of course, for the new property tax assessments that disproportionately impact the black neighborhoods, which have been undervalued for decades, again, according to Cook County, according to the person who is not up for re-election, who is not trying to paint everybody as an evil white racist. This is all down to the actions of the city of Chicago, and Brandon Johnson is trying to scapegoat everyone in order, again, to avoid cutting the budget because he's trying to pay off key constituents. And again, even the local news media is targeting Brandon Johnson, despite the fact that he is this black Democrat that they should be in love with. They realize that he can't stop lying. And again, a perfect example of this is him trying to sell his new spending program as being about public safety, when in reality, what it's actually about is paying off black youths, again, so that he could pay off the black constituency with summer job programs that he is disguising as law enforcement.
I can't live in hypothetical. What I can say is that we're talking about a community safety fund that will strictly go to ensuring that the mental health and well-being of our police officers is secure.
Well, the majority of that is going for the summer youth jobs, half of it.
Hiring people is a part of our safety plan. In fact, this is why this budget is so critical, right? Because this budget protects us from Trump's cuts.
So yeah, don't be fooled by Brandon Johnson crying about the budget and saying that you don't know what it's like, and he relates so hard to the poor blacks in the city of Chicago. What he's actually crying about is the fact that he has gotten caught, that he has no political capital, and he is going to be forced, hopefully by the alders, in order to cut the budget of the city of Chicago because there is so much waste in it. It's absolutely absurd. Again, we talked about it before. I'm not going to get too much into it now, but the city of Chicago actually paid a financial firm to do an audit of the budget, and Brandon Johnson is hiding the results of that audit because they found hundreds of millions of dollars in savings in wasteful government programs, but Brandon Johnson doesn't want to talk about that because every single one of those dollars in waste goes to someone, and that is how he's trying to float his way to re-election, by paying off every constituency he possibly can. But guess what? The bills have finally come due, and Brandon Johnson is absolutely done in the city of Chicago. I will be shocked if he wins re-election, but then again, cities like this tend to elect worse politicians over and over again. Remember, Brandon Johnson is the replacement for Lori Lightfoot, so maybe there is no hope for the city of Chicago at all whatsoever. But of course, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Brandon Johnson failing on the budget and trying to cry about it. Till next time.